Today we are fortunate to welcome Judge Richard Kaufman, a proud Wayne Law alumnus of class of '77. Judge Kaufman served as the Chief Circuit Judge of the Wayne County Circuit Court, and as I was just informed, he was actually the youngest elected in that position. As well, he was the Deputy CEO of Wayne County, an appointed position. In addition to this, in addition to his distinguished career in the judiciary, he was a partner at Zausmer, Kaufman, August, and Caldwell, now known as Zausmer, for over 15 years. Beyond his legal accomplishments, Judge Kaufman is also known for his commitment to enjoying life through hobbies such as tennis, travel, yoga, and spiritual practice. And as he shared with me during the lunch a few weeks back, the most important thing perhaps in his life is spending quality time with his partner, who's also my Aunt Susie. She's an incredible woman. Yeah. Judge Kaufman, we are truly honored to have you here today and to have you back on campus. We look forward to hearing your insight and your advice. Thank you again to Judge Kaufman for being here, and the floor is now yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming here. When I talked to Cole yesterday, and he indicated that 11 people had signed up, I was talking to my wife Susie, and I said, I should have added a little bit to the title of my speech. How to enjoy a career as an attorney, a secret revealed. Anyway, thank you all for coming here. I hope my presentation you find interesting. I am quite sure you'll find it unexpected. In 1977, I graduated from this law school in the top 10% of my class. I spent 3 years at the Wayne County Organized Crime Task Force, a division of the prosecutor's office. I then spent 3 years in private practice. I spent 15 years as a Wayne County Circuit Judge, and 8 years as Chief Judge of that court. I then was the head of the Smart Public Transportation System for 3 years. I then spent 18 years in private practice, in which my partners and I took a 8-lawyer law firm and made it a 55-lawyer law firm. And then I left there and I spent the last 7 years of my legal career as Deputy County Executive for Wayne County, which I was in charge of a $1.5 billion budget and 3,500 employees. So what do you know about me from this history? Well, you know 2 things for sure. 1, I can't keep a job. And 2, I'm old. You think I'm old? I graduated here in '77. My brother-in-law is here. He graduated here in '70. So now we're talking old. So why did I have so many jobs in my career? In all these jobs, I experienced some joy, but not as much as I wanted and not as much as I expected. The problem, I was focused on succeeding in the job instead of doing the job. I thought joy would come from success. But the joy in the success was short-lived. I would spend years in these jobs in search of achieving success, and when I achieved that success, I was happy. Some of those jobs, that happiness lasted for a week. Some of it lasted for about an hour. And then I would feel empty. And to fill that emptiness, I'd go find another job, again in pursuit of success. But the joy to stress ratio in these jobs caused me to think there must be a better way. Of all these jobs, the one I enjoyed the most was my last one as Deputy County Executive for 7 years. Partly because of the nature of the job, but mostly because I finally took the time to learn how to enjoy work. This learning also translated into bringing joy into many other parts of my life. I use the term learn on purpose. Knowing how to bring more joy and happiness in your life is a learned skill. It does not come naturally to most humans. Many people think everybody else knows how to be happy except me, that when they gave out the happy pills, God, I just didn't get one, and everybody else got one. Well, disabuse yourself of that idea. Most humans are miserable. Some of the time, most of the time, or all the time. If you doubt this, let me read you the first paragraph of a foreword I wrote for a book that a friend of mine wrote. The highest goal of a human being is happiness, but not many reach it. An epidemic of failed marriages and partnerships, suicide, soaring rates of addiction, eating and mood disorders suggest there are a lot of unhappy people. The problem is often compounded by feeling shame in our sadness, fear, and loneliness. We feel a need to hide it. We even go out of our ways to mask it from others. On social media, we try to appear happier than we are, and we lie frequently each day when our response to how are you is fine. We try to convince the outside world we're happier than we are, while often internally convincing ourselves we're worse than we are. Is unhappy and ashamed really the best we can do as humans? Or, as John Lennon asked in Instant Karma, why in the world are we here? Surely not to live in pain and fear. We make choices how to act in the world with the purpose of producing happiness, but our choices aren't working. Most people are not happy. Why? Because they don't know happiness is a learned skill. And this skill takes a lot of time, knowledge, learning, and effort. As much or more than the time it takes to learn how to be a doctor, an engineer, a fighter pilot, or even a lawyer. So today, I am going to try to teach you the basics of how to bring more happiness and joy into your life. And it has nothing to do with what you learned in law school. Humans, by and large, are unhappy because we spend most of our time worrying about the past or anxious about the future. Sound familiar? So why do we do this? To answer that question, we have to start with a much more basic question. And that is, what is a human? What equipments do we have that allow us to function in this world? What is amazing to me, and I was no different than any of you, that most of you are in your 20s and are smarter than the average bloke, but you have spent more time learning how a car works than how you work. You know, a car has a carburetor, brakes, muffler, spark plugs, etc. And you know the function of these equipments. But you have lived your life without a clue as to what you are and how you function. Well, thank your lucky stars, that is about to end. And we start with these fundamental questions. What is a human? What equipment do we have? What is the function of each piece of equipment? Well, let's answer the first question. A human being has 3 pieces of equipment. We got a body, we got a mind, and we have something called an intellect. That's a human. And how we harmonize the use of these 3 pieces of equipment determines how happy or sad we will be. So what's the functions of these 3 equipments? The body acts, the mind feels, and the intellect thinks. The body acts, but it cannot act without direction. And the only places our body can get direction from is our mind or our intellect. Let's talk about the mind and the intellect for a minute. Almost everybody uses the word mind to cover both the mind and the intellect. In my humble opinion, this results in very fuzzy thinking. So do me one favor during the rest of my remarks. When you think of the mind, think of it only as the place where you feel emotions. And the only place where you feel emotions in your intellect is the only place where we're capable of logical, rational thought. The only place we can make objective assessments. So for the next half hour, please think of mind equals emotions, feelings, intellect, reason, and logic. Okay?
Got it.
So a human being has 3 pieces of equipment, a body, a mind, and an intellect. And how well these 3 pieces of equipment work together determines the amount of joy and happiness you will experience in your life. To illustrate how these equipments work together, let's take a simple example. A diabetic has a craving for candy, but he or she decides not to eat the candy because although he or she will enjoy the taste of the candy, he or she knows that the long-term consequences of eating the candy to his or her health will likely be worse than the short-term joy from the taste of the candy. All the equipments of a human are functioning correctly in this example. And the equipments are working in harmony to achieve the desired result. What's the desired result? The intellect is in control. The intellect overrules the mind, and the body acts in accord with the intellect, not the mind. The intellect should act like the adult in the room, and the mind is the child that needs the guidance. If the mind controlled our body in our example, we would eat the candy and likely suffer the long-term health consequences. So you say, what's the problem? I'll just use my intellect to make my decisions as to what I should or what I should not do. The problem is you don't. Almost all humans choose what to do or what not to do in most circumstances based on direction from their mind, not their intellect. And that is what leads to all human sorrow. Pretty big claim, isn't it? Well, let's see if I can remove some of your skepticism and back up this claim. The mind, which only feels and has emotions, has no boundaries, no guardrails. The mind leads one to act in a way that will make it feel good. But the mind has no sense or ability to reflect on the consequences of its decision, which results in its acts. It's only interested in satisfying its desire to feel good now. You don't believe me? Let me ask you this. How'd you decide? What were your reasons for coming to law school? Maybe at some point ask yourself, did those reasons come from the mind or the intellect? In fact, let's play a game. I'm going to give you some possible reasons you decided to come to law school, and you're going to tell me whether they came from the mind or the intellect. Ready? If I become a lawyer, I'll be respected. Mind or intellect? Well, does that reason have anything to do with how successful you're going to be in law school or in the practice of law? Or whether or not your nature is such that it fits with being a lawyer? What do you get from being respected? You feel good. That's what it means. I want to become a lawyer because I'll respect it because it's going to make me feel good. absolutely no connection to success of a lawyer. But maybe some people go to law school for that reason. Okay, let's try another. If I become a lawyer, I can make a lot of money. Mind or intellect? Any connection to what you're considering pursuing? Connection to whether or not you're going to like it, whether or not you're going to be successful at it? Why do you want to make a lot of money? Because it feels good being rich. It's not your intellect, that's your mind. Okay, let's go for a third one. If I become a lawyer, I can help people. That's got to be a good reason, right? Mind or intellect? Well, it's mind again. Nothing to do with success in law school, nothing to do with whether you're going to enjoy the pursuit of being a lawyer, no idea whether or not you'll be successful in law practice. I want to help people means I want to feel good because I'm helping people. Comes from the mind. Okay, let's do a fourth one. I've analyzed my nature. And I've analyzed what a lawyer does, and it is consistent with my nature. Mind or intellect? Well, you guys know it's intellect by now. I have one intellect one. There's a connection between the question you ask, the answer to the question, and what you're going to pursue. Which has nothing to do in being a law student or lawyer with being respected, rich, or helping people. Or how about the reason, well, I had nothing else to do? Okay, I'm going to give you some more proof that humans make way more choices from their mind instead of their intellect. Shakespeare wrote a play called Othello. You may be familiar with it. Othello was the general in the army. And he had a wife, Desdemona. And Desdemona is acclaimed in all the Shakespearean literature to be one of the finest female characters in all the Shakespearean plays. Kind, respectful, virtuous, smart. Any event, Othello had a lieutenant named Iago. And Iago had been hoping to be promoted to captain for a long time. And when the position became available, Othello picked another. Iago was so mad that he started spreading false rumors. About whether Desdemona had stayed faithful to Othello. And Othello got so angry, notwithstanding who Desdemona was, that he believed the lies and he killed Desdemona. After he killed Desdemona, it came to light that Iago had planted the things to make him believe it was true when it wasn't true, so then he killed himself. So, let's start with Iago. His decision to try to spread a false rumor about Desdemona, did that come from his mind or his intellect? He was angry. He wanted to get back at Othello. He thought he would feel good by making Othello suffer because Othello had not given him the job he wanted. Okay, Othello gets this information, and he gets angry, and he gets to the point where all he looks at is the reasons to support his anger, not the objective stuff out there to the contrary, so he kills her. Was that a decision from the mind or the intellect? But to me, the most interesting part of the play of Othello is who Othello appointed as the captain instead of Iago. And Shakespeare tells us only one thing about this person. He was a mathematician. What does a mathematician imply? Preciseness, objectivity in the world. You can't say, oh, 4 is good enough, 3, 4, 5, what's the big deal? You have to have a precise mind and you look at the world objectively. Shakespeare's use of the word mathematician could have just and easily been a person with a strong intellect. That's what he was telling us. Hamlet, the famous oration. To be or not to be? That is the question. That is just like saying, do I use my mind or do I use my intellect? To be, do I stay on this earth and try to get justice for my uncle killing my father and my mother marrying my uncle? Do I have the wherewithal to stick around here in life and try to be righteous and do something about these injustices that occurred? To be, intellect. Not to be. I'm so sad. I can't go on anymore. I think I'll kill myself. Mind or intellect? To be or not to be? Could have just said to use the mind or use the intellect. The truth is, the theme of just about every Shakespearean play is the struggle between the mind and the intellect. And the ones where the mind wins are called Shakespearean tragedies. And the ones where the intellect prevails are called Shakespearean comedies. Anybody know what comedies means in the formal sense? Comedies means a happy ending. Every Shakespearean play, and why we find it so interesting, is the struggle between the mind and the intellect. As John Milton, the author of Paradise Lost, wrote, the mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven. If you make choices from your mind inconsistent with your nature, your mind will be a hell. If you make choices consistent with your nature, which can only be done by applying the logic and reason of your intellect, you have a shot for a mind that can feel like heaven. And remember, all your feelings, emotions come from your mind. Again, you can only be happy if you make choices that are consistent with your nature. And the only equipment you have as a human to accurately assess your own nature and make choices consistent with your nature is your intellect. A person who has a nature for business should do business. A person who has a nature for artistic endeavors should do art. A person who has a nature to build stuff should build stuff. And who made this point better than anybody else? Shakespeare. This, above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow like the night to the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Shakespeare's main point in this very famous quote is about integrity. It's about if you live a life contrary to integrity, we call it conscience sometime, you're just not going to be happy. But Shakespeare was also talking about lesser aspects of your nature. A person who does not live consistent with their nature is being false to themselves. A person who has an artistic nature, who goes into the family business, is not being true to themselves and is creating massive roadblocks to joy and happiness. But the process of using one's intellect can get complicated. That's why it's a learning thing. You got to learn this, and I've been studying it for 13 years, and I got a long way to go. But I can tell you what I believe. It is the only way to joy and happiness, is to live from your intellect, not your mind. But as I said, the process of using one's intellect can get complicated. Allow me to use myself as an example. I loved law school. I know, weird, but I did. I loved reading, learned at hand, Cardoza, the great writers. I loved the back and forth in class, and I just loved being trained to think as a lawyer. And in my 40-some years since I graduated here, being a lawyer, thinking like a lawyer, has been extremely consistent with my nature. Luckily, I did go into the family business. My father graduated in 1947, and my grandfather graduated from DCL in 1917, and my brother-in-law graduated from Wayne School in 1970, so I kind of went into family business. But thank God, it was consistent with my nature. Not that I had thought back then, using my intellect about it. I made all the mistakes there was to make, but I got lucky on this one, that it was consistent. But I absolutely hated the practice of law. I would walk into my office every morning and I would be scared shitless of what would be on my chair and the dread I had of who did I have to fight with today. And I did that for 3.5 years. Finally, the little intellect I had counseled me that if I was going to make a success of a legal career, I had to do something more consistent with my nature, something that didn't require me to fight and be an adversary all the time. So I decided to run for judge, and thank God I got elected, and it allowed me to be a lawyer in a career where I didn't have to fight. I could be in the middle. I then, recognizing this, tailored the rest of my career to avoid the part of my nature that I hated as a lawyer. And so, for pretty much all of it, I was able to stay in the middle. When I went to the law firm after I had been a judge and the head of SMART, I got a little cocky and thought, hey, I'm ready to be a litigator. Well, I did that for 2 years, and my nature came back, and I said, I cannot do this. So the 18 years I was with the law firm, almost all of my time, I got to be a mediator. People would come to me, and I'd mediate their cases. I'd be in the middle. I wouldn't have to fight with anybody. So even if you have an intellect and a nature consistent with something, you got to get into the nuances, because human beings are complicated, and developing the intellect requires recognizing and assessing these nuances to grow your intellect. So in effect, I created a legal career as consistent with my nature as possible, and putting myself and tried to, as much as possible, not to put myself in situations where I had to act contrary to my nature. Now, you can't do that completely, but the more you develop your intellect, the better off you're going to be avoiding those situations, and the more joy, peace, and happiness you can attain. If this is true, what's the next question? What's my nature? It's impossible to act consistent with your nature if you don't know your nature, or more likely, not taking the time to assess it. So let's spend a few minutes talking about human nature. There's only one species of animal in the world that has an individual nature, and that's a human. Every other animal in the world has a collective nature. Every lamb is meek. Every cow is a vegetarian. Every lion is ferocious. And therefore, they are easy to assess. You may put your hand out to pet a lamb or a dog, but you're not going to try to pet a lion or a snake. Why? Because you got an intellect. All animals except humans can take comfort in their collective nature. All their choices are pre-programmed when they're born. They cannot change their nature. They have virtually no free will. Humans are not only the only animal with an individual nature, but a human can use his intellect to change his nature to some extent. So how do you assess your nature? Your nature is the sum total of your likes and your dislikes. What you like is consistent with your nature. What you don't like is inconsistent with your nature. But properly assessing your nature can get complicated. By your mind's desire for instant gratification. The diabetic may like candy, but he likes his long-term health more. So is his nature to eat candy, or is his nature to make reasonable decisions for his long-term health? A person may dislike getting off the couch to go exercise, but he or she likes the feeling of feeling fit and healthy. So is your nature to stay on the couch, or is your nature to get off the couch? So in analyzing one's nature, one cannot stop at the shallow likes and dislikes of the mind, but must apply the reason and logic of the intellect to thoroughly explore the complexities of your individual nature. Allow me to give you an example of this. At first blush, my example may seem mundane, but I think it's kind of profound. About 6 years ago, I met this wonderful woman who is now the love of my life. And a little over 2 years ago, we moved in together. And she lived in a nice condo, 1,800 square foot condo, 1 bedroom. In this 1 bedroom, we have a master bathroom, and the bathroom has 2 sinks. Her sink, which is closer to the electrical outlet, and my sink, which is about, 5-6 feet away from the outlet. So one day I get out of the shower, and as I do, I'm very interested in hygiene, I use my water pick. So I fill up my water pick, I'm ready to turn it on, and I push it to turn it on, and nothing happens. What's wrong here? So I look down the extension cord to where it was plugged in, and the damn thing is unplugged. I am furious. Who unplugged my water pick? God damn it. So he probably unplugged it to dry her hair, and she's too lazy to plug the back thing in the wall? Ooh, I was mad. That was my first reaction. A couple minutes later, as I was about to storm out and give her a good piece of my mind, a little bit of my intellect came up and said, you might get a little blowback from yelling at her about this. Maybe we need to rethink what we're going to do here. And I said, okay, I'm not going to go yell at her. Just plug the thing in and carry on. So my second reaction was, a little bit of intellect. I decided not to go yell at her, but my mind was furious as can be. So this goes on for a couple days. Finally, the thing's unplugged, and this fury is in me, and it's even in me more because I didn't tell her about it. And now I'm being this magnanimous, wonderful person who is like so upset inside. Maybe being upset inside isn't like the best way to be happy and joyful. So I had a little more intellect to use. And I said, Rick, let me see, it's about 4 feet here. You plug it in, and then you walk 4 feet back. It doesn't take very long. And all of a sudden, my anger was gone. When it's unplugged, I can walk 4 feet, plug it in, and I can walk over here and use my water pick. But that wasn't the end. About 2 weeks later, it was unplugged. And I looked at that unplugged cord. And I said to myself, if I don't say anything to Susan, and I walk over there and I plug it in, and then I come back, she may not even know it, but I'm doing a service for her. I'm letting her not worry about having to plug something in after she's done her hair, and the burden to me objectively, ain't that bad to walk 4 feet there and 4 feet back, and I'm serving her. Now, you may not believe this last part, but this last part is true. Now, when I go to use my water pick and it's not unplugged, I feel like I've lost the chance at joy. Who are you laughing at? Okay, this is a true story. And it has taken me 13 years of trying to understand the mind and the intellect and the role my mind plays. It is a very strong role the mind plays. It is hard. And the role my intellect plays in trying to grow my intellect to be able to get to that point. And I don't always succeed, but I do try in every situation of life to look at it that way and to try to figure out what's my intellect saying. And I'm getting two benefits. Not only am I using my intellect in that situation, I'm growing my intellect for the next situation. Using my intellect to control my mind, I succeeded in this life situation from going from poignant agitation to pure joy. So what was my nature in this situation? Was it number 1? Was it number 2? Was it number 3? Was it number 4? In your own life, if you had a similar situation, where would you like to be on that continuum? I believe by use of my intellect that I was able to develop somewhat. My nature became doing service for somebody I loved, which brought me joy. So the intellect can be so valuable in not only recognizing your nature, but sometimes recognizing the silliness, the absurdness, what we feel like we want to do to avoid a very temporary emotion. And how far is that taken by so many humans? The intellect is the faculty humans possess to think, judge, reason, to decide on the pros and cons of life. The capacity to inquire and not take anything for granted. Mostly you have to develop and strengthen your intellect by yourself. Don't blindly follow the line of your predecessors. Instead, build the strength of your own intellect. You can do this by using your own intellect to think, to reason, to question everything you meet in life. One useful exception to this rule is the concept of the borrowed intellect. One of the reasons it is hard to grow your own intellect is because developing the intellect requires objectivity. You need to, as best you can, look at the world how it is, not how you want it to be. Most of us have a problem in being purely objective in our use of the intellect. Why? I gave you the answer 20 times. Because of our mind. Because the likes and dislikes of our mind significantly affect our intellect's ability to be objective. While we're trying to be objective and look at a situation, we got our mind, I like this, I like that, and that's affecting what we're going to do. And the more you can divorce yourself from the subjectivity of the mind's likes and dislikes, the better you are. Almost impossible to be completely objective by yourself, So go borrow somebody's intellect. A trusted friend, a trusted family member, a teacher, because they can give you advice free from your mind. They got their own mind, but when you're asking them a question about you, they don't care about their own mind. They can be totally objective about this. It's like when you're watching a movie and you're looking at the characters there. And how many characters do you say, this is what you should do? Why can't you do it? We all know we're sitting here. This is what you should do. But the character doesn't do it. Why? Because he's stuck in his mind. Do not accept anything that does not admit logic and reason. The constant exercise of thinking, reasoning, and questioning throughout your life strengthens your intellect. Galileo, I like to drop names. Galileo, the father of astronomy, said it well. I find it hard to understand why humans don't use this wonderful faculty, the intellect, that they possess. I myself do not feel obliged to believe that the same God who endowed us with this sense, reason, and intellect intended us to forego its use. Or listen to the poet William Drummond. He who cannot reason is a fool. He who will not reason is a bigot. And he who dares not reason is a slave. So recognize you have an intellect. Grow and strengthen your intellect. Have your intellect guide your mind. And I assure you, you will bring a lot more joy and happiness into your life.